Hey, it's ill-esha here, and welcome to my little tutorial trying to focus on getting vocals to sit right in the mix. Now, electronic music can be a little bit tricky to get right with vocals because when you're doing your traditional band thing, you've got guitar, maybe piano, bass, drums, a very set palette of instruments. But the thing with electronic music is you're not really limited by the amount and type of sounds you can make. In melodic music, you've got a lot of pads and arps and lots of things that are going to take up the same frequency range. So the first way, I'm just going to show you real quick because it's probably the simplest thing you can do, and it's something that I would call and answer. And this is simply just arranging your parts so that there's never very much going on at once, but things take turns. In this case, this is a song I made called Finding Beauty in Frustration. There's a lead vocal part and a bunch of heavy synths that only hit when the vocal's off. If you look at this section on screen, you can see the holes over top of the vocals, but let's take a listen.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do now? What you gonna do? What you gonna do now? What you gonna do? What you gonna do now? What you gonna do? What you gonna do now?
Not much to go over here, except if you just take a closer listen, you can really hear that the vocals and the pads never happen at the same time.
What you gonna do? What you gonna do now? What you gonna do? What you gonna do now?
The next example I'm going to use is a track called We Animals, which is originally by my friend Lila Rose, aka Animal, and it's a remix she asked me to do. And the first thing I focused on was how sort of lovely and dark and wispy her vocals are. If you listen right here.
We're animals, don't you forget it.
I wanted to have a pad happening over top of the hook where she sings that, but I just didn't want it to sonically clash. So I made a serum patch where the highs and the extreme sort of clashy clash part over the vocals are filtered out. There's some sort of distortion, compression, and basic stuff, but if you just listen to the pad on its own, it's quite dark sounding. If you look at its EQ, you can see there's really not much going on in the high end where her vocal would sit.
We're animals, forget it. Animals,
You can also, of course, make a patch and do some EQ over top of it to achieve the same effect. Simply designing your elements to not contain the same frequencies would be the second way to do something. The next example we're going to check out is another sound design sort of tip, using envelopes in your sounds, particularly your pads, to work with what you have for vocals. So in this track, this is a remix of my very good friend's Unified Highways cover of Losing My Religion. And the original has a really sort of soft reggae kind of vocal with not a lot of high ends in it. So
I think I thought I saw you try losing my religion.
I've processed this vocal so that the mid ranges are bumped up. There's a little bit of tube distortion and saturation just using this Butch Vig vocals. And so on purpose, it's sort of taking up a lot of mid range and a lot of power. To balance that, I used a pad that I made with very, very sibilant highs and sharps. However, an envelope on it that sweeps up around the vocals. So it's almost like call and answer in that the vocal and the pad are never peaking at the same time, but rather moving around each other.
I thought that I heard you say, I think I thought I saw you try losing my religion.
So you can hear that not only are the pads and vocals sort of enveloping around each other to make room, but there's sort of a pleasing push-pull that gets created. So that's another way, is using envelopes strategically. It's basically got a longer envelope in and a long LFO that's controlling unison and the reverb both. So there are effects that also don't sweep up until the very end of the section. And that also just leaves a lot of space for vocals. The next technique we'll check out really quick is using Neutron, which is a really fun new plugin from Isotope that basically helps you out with mixing as if there's a little gnome in your computer, which is something I've always wished for many times when I'm on bounce number 34. So this is a track from my friend Ubita, gorgeous track. It's got a lot of big plucky synths and a lot of vocals. And especially I find when mixing male vocals, as I happen to have, as you might hear, a little bit of a low voice for a woman, I suffer the same problem. The mid-range, in your synths and male vocal type of range sit in the same spot. So right now we have a great song with a lot of big mid pads. But it's really murky. Obviously, we go back to one of the things I said before, which is stringent EQing is a big deal. But it can be a little tough to do this. In Isotope Neutron, you can do something called masking EQ. Put a neutron on the first element. In this case, we have the pads. I've already got some EQing that sits on this channel. It's going to give it some room that sits right in Ubita's vocal range, which is right here. I've also put another neutron on Ubita's voice, which has some stringent EQing done as well. And I did this EQing using the function I'm about to show you, which is called masking. So you can pick either neutron, hit masking, choose the other track, and all of a sudden you're looking at both your tracks in one window, and you can actually see the frequencies where they interfere with each other. And you can even hit this inverse link and make an EQ that goes opposite something else, like this. Once I turn the neutrons on, it's amazing how it will jump now that I've used the masking EQ side by side to alternately notch the vocals and the pads against each other. See, I'm also exciting the highs. This is a common problem I find when vocals are recorded not exactly perfectly. They definitely tend to sound a little toilet paper tubey, and often when it comes to EQing, I'm finding a common pattern in vocals is too much 1 to 2K, too much 3 to 5K. Those are both problem areas, and of course there's always low end that doesn't even need to exist. Sounds good. I find it's still a little bit crowded, and this is a good time to go into my next tip, MidSide EQ. MidSide EQ is a really fun thing when you've got a really full sound and you're quite happy with what it sounds like, but you know you have to play nice and make room for the vocal. So I'm going to solo the pads and the vocals together again, and you're going to hear what happens when I turn MidSide EQ on. I'm using a basic EQ from Ozone. You can select stereo, which is default. You can go to mid-side and select which channel. So I've got an EQ dip on the mid channel, right in that sort of 900 hertz male vocal kind of center range. So that means the center channel has a nice little notch cut out of it for Ubita's vocal to sit in. The side is actually bumped a little bit on the low and high end and kind of dipped down in the middle, so that the pads will still poke up around the side of his voice. You will find the glowing sunset. You will be happy again. subtle difference for sure, but hopefully you're able to hear that in your headphones. And I'm going to show you another project using that to show you what happens when you use two MidSide EQs. So this is another unreleased track, and it's got a really amazing big pad, which also has a really full frequency. It's taking up a lot of space exactly where my vocal wants to sit. However, I love this sound. I don't really want to change it that much. But when you put it up against the vocal, you kind of start to see that it's not going to work on its own.
Toss that coin, keep keeping low. You play to win, you're burning out. All days are gone, keep turning up, don't do no wrong.
So I need to make a little more room for that. What I've done is taken another ozone and altered the mid EQ on the pads. This one has been a really sort of steep, gradual thing because I know a lot needs to be taken out. So on my vocal, I have another ozone. And this one I messed just a little bit with the side, carving it out lower down and just giving myself room to poke through in the higher end, around 1 to 2K, and even leveling it off. And this is just another example of creating space.
You're only wasting all your time. So toss that coin, keep keeping on. You play to win, you're burning up. All days are gone, keep turning up, and it don't do no wrong until you realize you're wasting all your time.
Now, hopefully you can hear in your headphones that this creates a much more stereo field as well, because now you have kind of different things happening in both the sides and the middle of the sounds. So it can be really great for widening the stereo field as well. Now, last but not least, we're going to talk about a fairly basic concept, but something that people don't always apply to vocals, and that is sidechain compression. There's a lot of methods of sidechaining vocals to groups of elements in a song. In top 40, actually, a lot of the time, the vocal bus sidechains everything else, which I personally find a little drastic for electronic music since it's not just about the vocal. So I'm not going to do that here. But I am going to demonstrate how good sidechain compression with a vocal can also contribute to a push and pull sound. When would I want to use this? Probably when I have a wall of continuous sound in a project. And in this case, I've sort of got a long droney layer of multiple ambient sort of things. And it sounds like this. There's a lot of great high harmonics that will stick out nicely, but there's also that pesky mid part, and when we put it with my vocals, it may cause some problems.
Now I can see my love. It's all in 2020.
It's a little much, right? It's kind of just a big wall of sound coming at you, and there's not that much dynamics, nor is there room to really process any delicacy or nuances in the voice. No good. So what we're gonna do is put a compressor on this and sidechain it to the vocal bus. One of the things to do, just like any other kind of sidechaining, is really pay attention to your attack and your release, because sometimes you may want it to be completely invisible and just come in and out of there real quick. Other times you might want to play with longer releases to give it that swelling feeling. So let's try a few.
Now I can see my love. It's all in 2020.